Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Nice to see the sunshine. Driving in tonight. Start our meeting as usual with our public comments. 2 minutes for each person to address the county board, and state your name and address, please.
Justin Green, 466 Chestnut in the city of Winona. Last week was Action Day for the Stepping Up Initiative. This board on June 19, 2015 passed a resolution joining the Stepping Up Initiative to reduce the extent to which we have mental illness in the jail. We incarcerate people, yes, because they've committed a crime, but we don't treat their mental illness. And the Stepping Up Initiative was designed to change all of that. And some of you, many of you, I think, went to the meeting with Senator Franken in July of 2015 when we talked about the Stepping Up Initiative. In the last several years, we've done some things on the Jail and Jail Alternatives Committee that address the whole question of mental illness in the jail. We also, with the help from other places, got the Jail and Justice and Mental Health Consortium grant, which also addresses this whole question of mental illness in the jail. We did a complete sequential mapping of the process by which a person is arrested and brought through the criminal justice system, and always looking at the question of mental illness, how it's diagnosed, how it's identified, and then how it's treated if that's necessary. We also have a new gender-specific screening tool that we're using at the jail to screen people for mental illness, and we're really focused now on data collection. The Jail Advisory Committee met this morning. We spent about an hour going through that sequential mapping process with mental illness and arrests and the whole criminal justice process. Some of the things that we got in the JMHC grant are working out quite nicely. The jail intake worker, who does the bail evaluations and does the mental health screening, and that allows the care program to focus on transition out of the jail, whereas before Latricia was doing both parts of it. The crisis intervention team that was formed and is trained, I think it's operated by Hiawatha Valley Mental Health. We've offered that training to police agencies and to human service agencies and other agencies, and a number of those trainings have taken place. We did at one time have a health information exchange with Winona Health. Winona Health has since changed its mind and decided they don't want to do that. And we do now have video conferencing between Winona, Wabasha, and Houston County jails. It could save a lot of time, save a lot of money. Some people use it, some people don't. There's no requirement, for example, that attorneys meet with their clients by video conferencing rather than driving to Wabasha or driving to Houston. And of course, the judges are not yet trying cases remotely like they are in many parts of the country. But I just wanted to speak tonight and thank you for passing that resolution in 2015 that got us started on the Stepping Up Initiative. The work that we've done so far is going to pay off big time when we get to that point in the Jail Advisory Committee, because that is one of the true challenges in the criminal justice system now, is what do we do with people who are in jail and they leave the jail worse off health in terms of health, mental health. They leave the jail worse off than when they came in. And so we're not at all surprised when they are back in a very short period of time, and we wind up paying room and board and transportation for them. They get all these great tours of the countryside from here to the Wabasha jail and here to the Houston jail, and maybe even some other jails if we run out of space in Wabasha and Houston. So thank you very much for passing that initiative and for getting us started on all of this. And you'll be hearing more about this when the Jail Advisory Committee comes in. What, Ken, this year, next year, year after next?
That's supposed to be the end of the year. It's supposed to be the end of the year.
All right.
I have a comment.
Oh, okay.
If that's allowed.
Well, you have exceeded your 2 minutes, but we do not have a penalty for
I was watching you rather than
the hook. No, I happened to catch on C-SPAN about a week or a week and a half ago, and it was titled criminal justice and the mental health in our jails. I thought, sounds like a pretty good topic. It was about an hour and a half it was a panel discussion that was taking place, that had taken place just like within a week earlier. So it's very timely. And the panel leader was the doctor from South Florida that actually designed the stepping up system. And I wanted to knock on the TV and say, yes, we were the first in Minnesota to, adopt this. But
We were first in Minnesota. We were among the first in the country. And Judy Gilo is going to tell you that about 400 counties now have followed our lead, so.
Everyone spoke very well about how they had applied it in their situation and things like that. But it was just interesting to meet the guru who had designed that and sat down with NACO to make it part of their program so that it became, available just like that, to the people that needed it. So
They do webinars at least every 2 months or so, and they've got a series of webinars that are focused on small rural counties. I've listened to most of those. I've gotten some ideas from them. They're always interesting.
Yeah.
But I've gotten some ideas that I brought back to the committee.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Can I follow up just real quick on that?
Oh,
I'll wait till she-
hold on 1 second. That's okay.
Justin
Yes.
brought up the issue of the video conferencing, and at one time the board had talked about why the defense counsel, the public defender, they weren't using it as actively or weren't using it. I did talk to the public defender, and he's committed to giving us an answer, but he has to go through the people above him, and there was some change and turnover and so forth. I haven't talked to him recently. I don't know if Karn has, but he said he would get back to us.
They're still searching for a 3rd District Public Defender chief, so it's going to be a while. And so as far as getting an answer from.
Yeah, he's not ignoring it. He just needs
He
to
hasn't
get.
embraced it totally yet.
No, but he also needs to, talk to the higher ups.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that follow-up. Judy.
Judy Gilo, 29767 Pine Tree Lane, Winona, Minnesota. And as Justin said, there are 400 counties now. I just got this notice a couple days ago in the mail that there is a webinar coming up on Thursday, which I'll be watching. So as long as we were coming, I thought I'd just share it with you. And again, it's to reduce the number of people with mental illness in jails and building on the successes that counties have seen that have done some of it already. And like Justin told you, we are doing some data collection. But the stepping up itself is expanding its work to provide counties with the tools that they need to systematically identify people with mental illness who enter local jails. Consistently and accurately identifying people with mental illnesses will result, of course, in better connections to treatment in jail and in the community, and collecting and tracking data on these individuals is essential to understanding the extent of the challenges locally and setting goals for improvement and measuring progress. So I'm hoping to pick up some new ideas that we maybe don't have that we're trying in our jails to keep track of the data. And you talked about what was on TV the other night. It was on Frontline, I believe. It was about the people in prisons that are in the solitary confinement. And when our people aren't here in our local jails, we lose complete control. The state prison systems are totally different. They're held in segregation a lot. And there was a warden who said, whoa, wait a minute, we can do things better than this. We can rehabilitate these people and get them to be paying taxpayers. So he had a success rate, and it was out east somewhere, and I failed to write it down. 100 people that were in segregation, down to 45 people in segregation. And they were in there before because they had violent behavior, and so they got them rehabilitated so that they could be back out into the regular prison population. Because as I think of myself trying to set in isolation for 30 days, I don't know that I'd be the same when I came out. So it's inhumane to treat people like that, so hopefully we can catch them in our local areas and get them rehabilitated. So again, thanks, along with Justin, thank you for signing the Stepping Up, and I'll continue to follow it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the county board? All right, seeing no one else, we'll move on to approval of the May 8th county board meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Pomeroy to approve the May 8th meeting minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Item 4, acknowledge receipt of the approved committee meeting minutes, the Planning Commission from March 15th.
I'll move to acknowledge both 4.1 and 4.2.
Okay.
Second?
All right. So we have the Planning Commission and 4.2, the Whitewater Joint Powers Board, February 15th. Motion made by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Olson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Acknowledgement of those committees. Consent comments and agenda items, Mr. Fritz?
None.
Marie?
Nothing.
Greg? Karen? Okay, I just have one announcement. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, second by Commissioner Jacob to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Mr. Fritz, if you'd read the consent business, please.
I'd be happy to. The consent business, Department recommendations, 6.1, approve resolution to establish various ballot boards. 6.2, approve renewal of liquor, beer, and 3.2% malt liquor licenses. 6.1, approve public health emergency preparedness grant project agreement amendment. 6.4, approve monthly resolution. 6.5, approve resolution for extinguishment of access and approve use of resulting revenue to construct loop driveway. 6.6, approve resolution to acquire right-of-way on CASA 4 and CASA 9. 6.7, approve addenda number 2 to lease agreements with Project Fine, Seaher, and Neng Vang for rental of space at Stone Point. 6.8, approve 2018 State of Minnesota Federal Boating Safety Patrol Grant Agreement. 6.9, approve payment of disbursements. I believe that concludes
I
the...
move to approve the consent business as
Second.
presented.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, seconded by Commissioner Kavesi to approve the consent business as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. We're on to general business. 7.1, approve rescheduling County Road 129 reconstruction to 2019 using sales tax funds. Mr. Kramer.
Good evening. As you're aware, this project is or had been planned for 2018 construction, and we've been working towards that. As we got towards the early spring here and looking at where we're at, and the recommendation is to reschedule this to 2019. Looking at what happened. I would say just with the accumulation of various different things that we're working on and priorities, we knew this one would be tough to get all of the pieces in place. We're not quite where we would need to be in order to be putting it out for bids for an early spring construction so that we could get good bids and allow the contractor to get the entire project done in one season, which would reduce the inconvenience for the neighborhood. So at this point, we're recommending to formally reschedule it for 2019.
Any discussion? Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I just have a question. Can you give us an update on the right-of-way progress? Have we received all of the permissions that we need, or all of the signatures and agreements, or where are we on that?
We've got significant legwork done on right-of-way. We have legal work done, which would be title work to verify who the property owners are that we need to acquire the right-of-way from, deeds drafted, a plat drafted. We have appraisals done. As far as getting the actual signatures from the landowners, that hasn't taken place yet. And actually our right-of-way agent that we've got working on the project, Brad King from SEH in Rochester, he had a pretty full plate when we brought him on board, and he was going to work on our project on Saturdays. So we've basically let him off the hook at this point. So that's it's not the same urgency as it had been when we were looking at being able to move forward. So just to be, we've got a good relationship with him, which was why he was able to work Saturdays for us, but we don't want to abuse that.
I was at the January meeting when you talked with homeowners and property owners about the right-of-way. And I thought he was very good and very thorough. Looking into your crystal ball and knowing that this is your busy season, are we going to be able to complete that piece of it during 2018 so that we can go forward immediately in 2019? I just want to know where we are in terms of getting ready to start so that we can start.
I did put a kind of a rough schedule in the board item in the background, the second paragraph, the short paragraph. What we would be looking at doing is getting that right-of-way acquisition, and we do have some details still to work out on the plans, but to get that done through the summer here, bidding in early winter, so, like in the Thanksgiving to Christmas time frame, opening bids, getting a contractor on board, actually clearing trees during the winter. There's a concern with the northern long-eared bats and the white nose syndrome, and if you're cutting down trees during the summer, you potentially are taking down a nesting tree. So it's better to take the trees down during the winter, so that'll be our plan to accomplish that in the winter for the trees that have to come down. And then major construction would be basically all next summer. So that's the, kind of the rough schedule that we're looking at.
So the right-of-way was the real piece that was holding us up this year?
It's the one piece that we didn't have in place where, we can't be awarding a construction to do work on property that we don't have the ability to do that on.
Okay. In terms of, there's just been some misunderstandings, I think, among the public, because I've had some calls and, earlier I had calls, and people aren't aware of what the total project looks like exactly. They didn't know about the delay. They will now. But is it possible we could have a public meeting, again, perhaps in the fall or during a time when you're not, flat out busy, so that we can actually bring the public on board with the new planning and then what the road really will look like?
I'm thinking that might be best to do that when we actually have a contractor, and then we can have
Okay,
them.
whatever, but I just, people were very confused about, is it on, is it off, are we doing, is this, they'd see something in the neighborhood and they'd call me and say, is this part of the project, have we started it? And I'm going, no, so I just, I guess a good news report would help too, but we just got to get the word out there.
We recently did a project meeting for our County 25 paving project north of Lewiston, which is concrete pavement, and they're going to be paving 24 feet wide. So if you think about trying to get in and out of your driveway while that's going on, that's a challenge. So we intentionally scheduled that when we had a contractor on board. We had the representative there. From the feedback we got, it was very well received. The neighborhood had a much better understanding of what to expect and whom they can contact for issues and how this will all play out. So, I'm thinking if we did something similar when we actually have a contractor on board and that representative can say, okay, here's our grand scheme, here's how we're going to make sure you can, get your groceries home in the evening and things like that, because that people need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Or get to school or get to work, that you're not just boxed in.
Okay, so we can have one.
Oh, absolutely.
Later.
And I'm thinking, I'd be reluctant to schedule a meeting like that if we really don't have any information other than the delay, which we don't really have any new information at this point. We've got the general layouts from January. But once we have a contractor on board, we can start talking about their specific schedule and their approach and how they plan on attacking the work to, accomplish it. And I think that will be helpful for the neighborhood to be able to hear that firsthand from them.
Okay, All right, I appreciate that because there was a lot of confusion out there of what was happening, what was not happening, when were things supposed to happen. You know, it was all,
can-
yeah.
Have a summer without disturbance, and we'll put that off to next year.
Okay.
I move to
Commissioner,
reapprove the, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I had Commissioner Jacob.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention, this really isn't unheard of. We had delayed the Alba and Utica shops a year or two, and that resulted in very favorable bids because of the amount of time that the bidders had to thoroughly look through it during maybe their kind of slow season. So I think that combined with, you don't want a contractor in the area, maybe moving forward when some of the people still haven't, might be willing to agree on how their land is going to be acquired, and it just would, you have to do things in the right sequence, and this will be the best way to have the most trust with the community that we're working through things, and we've approved it. It's going to happen. This will be the best for the community. So, but yeah, I'll be happy to second your motion.
Commissioner Palmer.
Yeah, I move to reschedule the project.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion made by Commissioner Palmer, I second by Commissioner Jacob to reschedule the County Road 129 reconstruction to 2019. Any discussion or questions? Just a point of clarification then. The actual final lift of asphalt we'll let it basically kind of sit almost half a year. It'll be in 2020.
It'll be in,
That's in your
Yes.
second paragraph that you
yes,
referenced time.
2020.
Right.
So the first lift, so they'll have a blacktop road going into the winter of 1920, and then we'll put the final lift on in 2020. And that way, if there's, any things that settle
roller
just a
coaster
little bit with the frost coming out that first spring, we'll be able to smooth that off.
Right, okay, so just so people clarify. And as Commissioner Jacob said, it's not unusual to delay projects of this length, and a big thing is the right-of-way acquisitions. It takes a lot of time sometimes and hopefully everybody's willingly.
Well, we're optimistic that we'll be able to work with everyone that's along the project.
Right.
You don't want to trespass to build it.
No, and we don't want eminent domain if we don't have to.
Right.
And I would like to, publicly, I did send to Dave, we did have a community meeting out in the Lewiston. Commissioner Jacob was there, and I did thank Dave and Troy and Jay were there, and then the Corral concrete people that are going to do it, and it was very well received. I've always stressed customer service, and I think we got an A on that one. The people, the community really did appreciate. They all got the same information. It wasn't, this neighbor heard that this, it wasn't the rumor mill type of information, so it was very, very good, and I thank Dave for that. And I did share, we do those little project pamphlets. Some of you may not have seen them, where they get mailed out to all the residents and they can see that. I did share that with both Wabasha and commissioners, and they really did like that. I said, feel free to copy and paste if you'd like, because I think.
You can give them the Word document and they can just put their data in there.
Because I think I said they had some big projects coming up, and it just creates a lot better community out of a project, so thank you.
The
Okay.
highway department's doing a good job building
Yes.
trust with the community.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. We have the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. All right. Thank you, Dave. 7.2, approve joining opioid litigation and partnering with Brillo and Benson Law Firm. Brillo?
Brio,
Brio.
right? Brio, I think.
Brillo, I'm sorry.
If I could just introduce, you have the packet, and I'm not going to go over everything because I'm sure you've had time to read it. But Mr. Briel, Mark Briel, is here from Briel and Benson, as well as Scott Benson, I think of the Benson part, right? Yes. And got to get this right, Mary Kate Cicero, and they've come down from Minneapolis to speak to you about their proposal. As I mentioned in my agenda request here, of the 4 law firms that were contacted who have been mostly involved in the statewide litigation. Briel and Benson was the only firm that responded to our questionnaire in great detail, and Mr. Briel and I have shared some Sunday emails, which is not a good thing to do on Sundays, but so they're here to present to you to answer your questions, but also give a short presentation about the litigation, what it's about, where it's at in the national scope, as well as some of the other counties that they're representing in Minnesota. And I just also want to note for the record here that Heather Johnson is here from the Community Services Department, Director. I've talked with Heather about the whole opioid litigation possibilities here. And we also have Phil Huerta here, representing really the youth. I think really he's the director of the ASAP, or Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. So many people in the community are interested in the whole opioid question and concern. So I'll leave it to Mark and his folks.
Thank you. Mr. Benson's got some handouts. This is, we obviously can't cover everything that you would like covered tonight, but this is basically an encyclopedia of what's going on right now around the country.
Anything that we get should really be available to the public.
Yes, tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Well, I noticed today when I was sitting out in the meeting room that today is my 37th anniversary of being admitted to the bar. So I've been doing this for 37 years as of today. Now, thank you for inviting us to present our proposal to you on going forward with this litigation. As Karen pointed out, I'm here with Scott Benson, my partner, and my colleague, who's a lawyer in my firm, Mary Kate Cicero. We represent, our firm represents clients in very complicated financial litigation. And about 2 years ago, actually it's about 3 years ago now, we were asked by a number of the counties in the metropolitan area to investigate the opioid lawsuits and the crisis. And we did, and at that time we joint ventured with the firm that had just started that litigation, which is Motley Rice in Washington, D.C. They are the premier firm in the opioid litigation. They were the premier firm in the tobacco litigation. We called up Linda Singer, we met, and we put together a pretty big booklet on what had been going on. And at that time, it just became dormant then. I mean, the various county attorneys that we had met with at that time decided they wanted to think about it more. So about a year ago, we were contacted again and asked to give a presentation, and we did. And we right now have given our proposals to a number of counties, and currently we represent Hennepin County, St. Louis County, Dakota County, Itasca County, Roseau County, Sibley County, McLeod County, and the city of Minneapolis. And we're also in discussions with a number of others to bring the opioid litigation. Now, what we're going to be seeking in this litigation is monetary damages on behalf of the Winona County for costs incurred due to the manufacturers and distributors' misconduct. That includes payment for improper prescriptions issued to county employees and retirees. It includes treatment costs for county employees and retirees, workers' compensation costs, unreimbursed costs of care in county health facilities, and unreimbursed first responder services and support care for individuals and families of individuals who have been suffering from drug overdoses. We're also going to seek treble damages under the Minnesota False Claim Act, punitive damages, and injunctive relief, stopping the defendants from doing this type of conduct in the future. Our firm will first interview, and when you start asking questions, I may defer, for example, to Ms. Cicero or to Mr. Benson. Ms. Cicero is the one that is will be the one gathering the documents, interviewing the people, and so she will have a much greater knowledge of exactly what we're going to ask. we're going to interview the Winona County employees and ask them to compile information regarding the costs associated with the opioids. That first phase of collecting information, we have to complete before we file the complaint. And as I said, I think we filed complaints right now on behalf of Hennepin County, St. Louis County, Dakota County is going out right now, and who else? And the city of Minneapolis. And this, when you're deciding as members of the county board about costs and what's the burden to you, this first phase is the most burdensome to you because it doesn't cost you money out of your pocket, but it costs you employees and public servants time, meaning somebody's going to have to collect these documents, somebody's going to have to copy these documents. To the extent that we can help and we can do any of the tasks that are involved, we will certainly do that. Once we prepare a complaint, we're going to file it in Minnesota State Court. What we're hoping for is we file a complaint in state court. All of the complaints we've filed right now have been removed. If you're a Minnesota resident and you sue an out-of-state resident and you assert damages in excess of $75,000, the defendant has the right to remove the case from state court to federal court. They've done it in all of our cases. They're doing it in most of those cases. But in the off chance that they don't do it, we would want to be in state court. So what happens is it goes to federal court, and then most of these cases now I think have been in front of Judge Thunheim. Has he been the one that any of the federal judges have been getting them? But immediately the cases are transferred from Minnesota to the Northern District of Ohio. That's the place where the center of the it's called MDL, or multi-district litigation. All of these cases from around the country are all being sent to the Northern District of Ohio for purposes of prosecution. Because that way, if people are asking for certain documents in one case, we're not going to get a separate ruling from some other judge in California or some other judge in Maine or in New Hampshire. And so it's all consolidated into multi-district litigation in Ohio. There are now, as I understand it, well more than 40 cases that have been filed that are consolidated there. In fact, the 40 number was a number I heard probably 4 or 5 months ago. And so I'm sure that's vastly increased by then. Now, we will be, and I want to remind you of this, the burden to the county is the burden of preparing the documents and the interviews and sitting through that. We are responsible, we in Motley Rice, are responsible for paying all pre-litigation investigation costs, filing fees, court costs, expert witness fees, and all other out-of-pocket costs incurred by us. And even if we fail to recover, you're only going to be responsible for the time and effort that you put in to the case. No additional costs, no fees. The fees are a 25% contingent fee based upon the recovery. I'd like to speak briefly about everything's gone to this multi-district litigation. And the judge out there has tried, Judge Polster, has been trying to settle these cases. And as my understanding is that the manufacturers were willing to enter into settlement negotiations, but the distributors weren't. So the judge has set what he's called the bellwether cases. There are 3 cases in Ohio. Motley Rice is one of those that are going to be tried. They're actually on a litigation track, and he's going to try those 3 cases to verdict in order to get kind of a, what are the juries doing, to get a pattern and kind of an understanding of what they're thinking and what kind of damages they're going to be. Motley Rice has got one of those cases. There's also a 3-person executive committee that manages and administers all of the litigation in the multi-district litigation. Motley Rice is, again, one of those 3 firms. There are also, in addition to those 3 bellwether cases, 5 other cases have been set aside to, and this is a procedural thing, the defendants will file briefs seeking to dismiss the complaints for lack of being able to state a claim or assert appropriate legal interests. 5 cases have been set aside and designated to be heard on motions to dismiss. One of those cases is the City of Chicago. Again, Molly Rice has the City of Chicago. Now, the judge chose these 5 cases on the motion to dismiss based on them representing a variety of plaintiffs, different kinds of defendants, and a variety of legal issues. Now, on May 10th, which was just less than 2 weeks ago, Judge Polster held a public session and then met privately with the plaintiffs, collectively, manufacturers, distributors, and pharmacies. And during that, he, again, encouraged settlement and encouraged the discussions and efforts of settlement to continue so that the case can be resolved as quickly as possible. That's kind of a general overview that went by very fast. But as you can tell, it's kind of complex. But I went from basically start to the present date in as short a time as I can. But I'm sure you all have questions, and as I said, I may defer some of the answers to people that know more about it, such as Mary Kate and Scott.
Questions? Commissioner Jacob.
Yeah, when you talk about the county and our commitment to kind of sifting through the information, and do you have any idea how much time or how much effort that might take?
We need you to come to the, we're on TV.
Oh, that's right, you're in recording.
Yeah, we record on TV. Thank you.
Generally, we start out with, I'll contact someone that would maybe be Karin or someone who would know who each department head is. And then, whether it's family services, drug court, the county attorney's office, healthcare workers, and then I'll schedule a time to meet with them, or a time to have a phone call with them and kind of tailor the questions towards them. And sometimes it's a very quick conversation in such that, maybe the jail doesn't keep the data of opioid trends or opioid costs. So it's the end of the conversation. If they do, a lot of times they can pass on, there is a handful of documents. I know with the workers' comps cases, those are a little bit more cumbersome. I'm not exactly sure on how long specifically it will take each department, but the phone calls generally last between 15 minutes and half an hour.
How much time does it take them to organize based upon Dakota County and Henry County?
Well, I collected the data for Roseau County, which is a smaller county, and on their side so far it has not taken more than a couple hours for them to find the data that I've needed. I don't know exactly how long it will take each department, but if it's something that is more cumbersome, I will work with them to really tailor what we need exactly for a complaint. And we don't need every single piece of information before filing a complaint.
We actually have quite a long list, a detailed list of things we need that we give to the people in the various departments. So they actually have that list to follow through on.
Yeah, I'm just somewhat envisioning how many different departments could have, how different aspects of this case could have got into each department, how much staff time. You make it sound like probably not a big deal. Before you gave your answer, I was thinking could be a full staff, almost a full person, almost a year by the time you get through a
with
case.
With respect to that, we've done Hennepin County, we've done St. Louis County, we've done Dakota County, and actually the information now, of course, they have greater staffs and more people. But the Hennepin County got us their information on a fairly prompt basis. Now, again, it's all relative. I mean, if you have 100 people and you designate 5, it's not as big a deal as if you have 10 people and you designate 5. But it's hard to, until we have that conversation with each of the departments and understand what specifically they have to do and what they have in terms of information, it's hard to give you a real estimate of what's going to be involved. But as I said, that's the cost to you. I mean, that's the burden to the county is to make that time available and organize the documents. And we've thought about, we had actually kicked this around a number of times about how about, our firm simply come in and do that. But there are privacy issues, there are HIPAA issues, it doesn't work that way. At a certain point in time, we can come in and start taking the burden off, but before that, I think we would run into a number of hurdles.
And if there are further people to follow up with within the department, I contact those people. I don't say to the head of the department or whoever I've spoken with, oh, well, can you find out from so-and-so the information we need? I would say, okay, who's the person I should contact about this? And then I contact that person to eliminate the burden and the communication between different people and different departments.
Okay, something has really got me puzzled here. Page 4 of your little ring binder, and you said this too. I mean, I don't think I have a problem with employees. It's our population. So the way I'm reading this is that we're checking out it's under 10A, damages arising, and it refers to, county employees, retirees. Where do we get into the jail aspect there? I'm sorry, I'm seem to be missing something.
Jail aspect?
Yeah.
Well, it would be, where we get into the jail aspect is, there's a section, and as I said, it's pretty detailed, but when you get into the jailing aspect, we're talking about recouping the costs to first responders, the amount of time people are either put into the jail for opioids or overnight or directed into programs, everything that costs the county money as a result of opioid addiction or opioid overdoses is what we're seeking to recover.
Okay, where do I guess I don't see that here. I'm confused.
Paragraph, 10 says, what types of damages county could seek is there precedent from similar cases.
Right.
And it talks about for collecting excess
Police,
costs for
fire,
police, fire, medical, and other services.
Right, but then A talks about employees, and like I say, I don't think I have an employee problem. It's the people that my employees are servicing that we're trying to gather
I think
costs.
that's just one other aspect of what's reimbursable.
Yeah, and it's that the very unreimbursed first responder services and support care for individuals and families and individuals suffering from drug overdoses. So that's kind of
That's the data that's going to be, in my opinion, difficult to gather and quantify, or maybe it's not. And Attorney Sonneman.
in a lot, and I don't know how your first responders have organized it. I know in the cases we've done so far in Dakota, Hennepin, Minneapolis, where they have a Narcan use, Narcan's fairly expensive. They have that pretty well documented. In fact, I think their board members and council members receive reports when they give Narcan and how much it costs almost every month. So the first responders had that pretty well organized. That was one of the better organized aspects of it, actually, in the counties we've done so far. They, since it's so expensive, had a pretty good handle on what they're spending. Social services and the cost to place children for folks, that's a little harder to quantify. But they have been able to put a number on it so far, but that does take a little more digging to get the social services.
Does it need to be very specific that it was an opioid problem, or it's just a drug addiction, or you're going after the manufacturer of a specific drug.
Yes, it'd have to be opioid.
It would have to be, okay, so again, we had a report here not too long ago from our the guy who does the autopsies, medical.
Dr. Reichert, the medical examiner. Mm-hmm.
So do we have to have that kind of data that says this was a particular opioid?
Well, and that was
Yeah.
my request to him about the opioid deaths, but it's not just the deaths. I mean, that was 19 deaths in the last.
Yeah, you had
I think since 2013.
Right.
But it's also the collateral, I mean, the child protection cases where children are removed because their parents are using opioids, whether the prescription drugs, children who use opioids, they, get their parents and grandparents.
But does this have to come from, there's the name, Pharma, that manufacturer? Purdue is a big.
No, we've named pretty much all the manufacturers of opioids are named. It's not just Purdue. We started with Purdue, but there's probably a list of 15 manufacturers and then distributors as well that are listed as defendants.
Yeah. And I think the out-of-home placement costs, and this came up in the jail advisory committee this morning too, about data collection, and we're all looking at data collection. I had a conversation with my staff after that meeting this morning, looking at juvenile data, but also, juvenile delinquency data, but also child protection data. And I'll have a conversation with Heather back there, but I'm been made aware that her staff has some data that would probably be available or may not as difficult to obtain as you might think about out-of-home placements and the bills that you can trace it from the bills that community services pays, and then we can look at those individual cases. I mean, my staff is willing, we've got interns, to actually look at case-specific files and go through those, obviously without disclosing names and things like that, but that you can glean that information from the case files, as to what was the reason the kids were taken out of the home, things like that, so.
I think Ms. Cicero has elaborated on the fact that she would be asking the questions, and my sense and understanding from your comments thus far indicate that you really haven't had a problem getting that data from the various counties that you've worked with, and that it didn't really pose to be an inordinately large task for any of the counties that you've worked with.
No, it doesn't appear. No one has said it's been an inordinately large task. There are some of the smaller counties that, there are departments that don't have data. I'll speak to someone and they say, we don't, to also answer Ms. Ward's concerns, we don't have data on, opioids as opposed to marijuana charges or, other drugs, so we can't separate them out. That's a 15-minute phone call, and I know that, and then it's kind of over. But no, we have not had.
And you have not really experienced a great deal of difficulty. I'm kind of thinking that we're maybe making a mountain out of a molehill, and that, maybe we should go along with this, and if some department finds that it's too onerous, perhaps it can consult with you or bring it back to the board to revisit it.
Commissioner Jacob.
Yeah, and I would be in agreement with, we should be moving forward with it. I just feel a little bit bad because, I know our staff is, they're short, and we're going to place yet another burden on them, and we don't know how big of a burden. So I just really want to be mindful that we're not setting ourselves up for another really need of a full-time employee to handle the.
Right. My sense is that Ms. Cicero is a pretty professional employee when it comes to knowing exactly what questions to ask. And I think that's why she's received the information with relative ease.
We have that system fairly well honed, meaning we have detailed lists that go out. They're the same lists that go out to every county. We're looking for the same types of information from each county. And as Ms. Cicero says, in some cases, the particular department doesn't have the information. And the one thing I do want to tell you is, as I said, I don't think anybody's ever come back to me and said it's too burdensome, because we have this talk up front. Mm-hmm. And if you come back and if you say this is too burdensome, this is taking too much time in a particular department, we'll figure out a way to help on that. We'll send someone down, or Ms. Cicero will come down, or someone will come down from my office. And to the extent we can help, we will help.
Commissioner Jacob.
I think the next question would maybe be for Attorney Solomon. It's a little awkward with their firm here, but it's just government the way it is.
Can't embarrass me.
Is it fair to assume that this has been open to any firm who wants, they're here and you've sifted through? Is there any other, are we being fair with the general, all the attorneys out there who may want to pursue a case like this?
I'll just tell you, the first time that we met, we met with a whole room full of county attorneys in the grand jury room at Hennepin County. And what came out of that is two firms were selected. The firms that I understand came in and gave interviews were the Robbins firm, the Gray Plant firm, the Lockridge firm, and our firm. Those were the 4 firms that were invited in. After that, my understanding is that only our firm and the Lockridge firm were retained. And I'm just kind of telling you how it's worked out. And since that time, we simply have been fielding phone calls, and, Karen will tell you I'm extremely responsive. Nobody's more responsive than I am. And, that's something that is a valid question, and one that you have to make a determination on whether you're comfortable with us or whether you want to have further interviews. That's totally up to you.
I'm not implying at all that I'm not completely comfortable with you. I just want to make sure that I'm being fair with the private sector, that everyone has had the same opportunity that you've had.
Can I respond to that too? Because what Mr. Briel was referring to, there was a meeting. It was convened by Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman in his office, as Mr. Briel said, at the grand jury room. And it was open to, in fact, we discussed it at the County Attorneys Association. And it's always an agenda item on the County Attorneys Association meetings every month, an update on the opioid litigation and which counties are in and which counties are thinking about it. So I felt that it was vetted very well by the County Attorneys Association, of which we're members, and I serve on the board of directors. And I did send that questionnaire that is contained in your packet to each of the 4 law firms that were at that meeting, because they were the firms that expressed the interest to that meeting. And there hasn't been any other firms that have jumped or even, said, well, wait a minute, we want to be considered at least beyond those 4. And then again, the other 3 responded, well, none of the other 3 answered the questionnaire. One of them said that they wouldn't answer an email. They'd only answer a phone call. So I think it's been well vetted by, frankly, the entire County Attorneys Association, because each county has been looking to consider this very seriously. So
I'm satisfied with that.
Okay. Commissioner Olson.
I guess, obviously, there's some prescribers that are at fault. Doctors that would overprescribe this knowing the harm, but they're getting either kickbacks from the manufacturers. Is that why we're going after the manufacturers or the distributors versus the prescriber?
Well, instead of going after the doctors, the cases of this side have to be organized in a certain manner. And we've asked people in the various other cases whether or not they want to add a local person that they think was somebody that was a wrongdoer and did wrongful things. If you add that person to the lawsuit, then the lawsuit, and that person's here in Minnesota, the lawsuit becomes unremovable to federal court, and it can be tried here in state court. If you want to do that, we can. I think what we finally have determined, and this is just a strategy, this isn't something that you have to go with, is if that happens here and we sue 15 manufacturers in Winona County and we sue all the distributors and we sue a doctor or a hospital, all that discovery is going to have to be done here in Winona County. That will have to be administered by a judge in Winona County, and all the depositions will take place and all the costs are going to be assumed, rather than being coordinated at a national level the way they are right now. And so we thought about that in the beginning. We specifically thought about that with some of the other counties, trying to keep them here, and we just decided that it was not an efficient way to get the justice that we want in order to stop these people from doing it. It just would be too expensive.
But it was interesting, at first you mentioned you'd like to keep it in state court, not federal court, and this would be a strategy to do that, but you decided not to.
Yeah, I would, if I could, I'd like to keep it in state court. It's and the thing is, if they don't remove it, we will keep it in state court. Go ahead, Scott. What were you going to say?
I should just add, if we knew about a pill mill in Winona County, we would bring a case in Winona County against the pill mill and add it and keep it here. We so far haven't discovered that in Minnesota in any of our counties yet. And definitely there are doctors who are prescribing according to what the manufacturers recommended. We don't see that as overprescribing as being their fault. The manufacturers were saying that these opioids were non-addictive and that this is how you prescribe it. And so it's hard to bring fault against the prescriber when they're doing what was recommended by the manufacturer. So we're not bringing that case because we aren't going to win it. But if there were a pill mill in Winona County that we knew about, yes, we would sue them and keep it here if we could. But so far, we haven't discovered evidence of that in any of our counties yet here in Minnesota.
What's before Commissioner? What's your definition of a pill mill?
Just where they're just prescribing opioids to people who they don't know what's wrong with them. Who they're just prescribing them to make the money.
Okay. All right.
And
wanted to make sure we were on the same.
Yeah. So
It's happening in West Virginia.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Right. There are some states where that is rampant, and in those cases, they sue the pill mill and they keep them in their county, and if we had that here, I think we absolutely would do that.
Okay. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, on a pill mill kind of situation, I know we've had presentations from Dr. Begwin at the hospital, and our local hospital has a pain medical management committee. Now, what I don't know is whether we were able to look into anything, because we're so close to Wisconsin, that evil Wisconsin. But, I mean, realistically, if something turned up just right across the river, would that change the case drastically? Would that bring it back here locally, or
I mean, if something turned up in Wisconsin?
as an easy prescriber relationship or whatever? I think the local doctors, through this medical management committee, I think they really have clamped down and looked at any patterns of prescriptions, or who calls on a Friday afternoon to say they've lost their pills, those kinds of things, and they've really dived into those kinds of abuses. And I mean, it's my understanding they have a pretty good handle on it. But I don't know if there's anything close by that we weren't able to get to in terms of those.
If there was somebody in Wisconsin that was doing the wrongful conduct, then they would be a citizen of a different state.
Right, so it'd have to go.
To federal court.
Okay, even though it might be affecting citizens in Winona County?
Well, it's for the same reason we're suing all the manufacturers, because they affected people in Winona County.
Okay.
You can sue them, but it gets removed to federal court.
Okay.
But if you know,
Just in case we discover anything that
if you
direction.
discover,
Yeah.
and if you discover something, there's no saying you don't sue them individually later on too.
Yeah.
Where they
Is
could remove it.
is a medical management committee for pain medicine, is that somebody you have interview questions for also?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
If you can, and when we talk to your folks in your health department, one of the questions is what hospitals are in your jurisdiction, who might we talk to there.
Okay.
They'll have good information to us
Yeah.
about what the manufacturers and distributors were telling them too. So frankly, we want to know what they had heard and what they were told.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to check to make sure about those doctors, so.
Commissioner Jacob.
So what I'm understanding then, that would answer both Greg's and or Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Kavesi's questions, is that our case would simply be against the manufacturers, which does not absolve any doctors that have mismanaged. That's still a liability, and if that turns up, that court case could still be had in civil
Still
suit.
sue them here in state court. That one wouldn't be removable if they're a Minnesota resident against a Minnesota county.
That's just not what this suit is about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, a little information is dangerous, and I know that this is a problem, opioids and everything, but of course, and we say we're not spending any money other than time to gather information, but there is a lot of money being spent, to pursue this. So last night, 60 Minutes, fairly reputable, I think, entity, they were comparing this to the tobacco case. So in a short synopsis, what makes this case different from the tobacco then and now? Are we approaching it differently? Is there similarities? And it seems like did we have to do something as Winona County to get part of that tobacco settlement, or was that shared uniformly? I guess.
In the tobacco litigation, so
Yeah, I guess I don't know. We benefited from that, but I guess, and now we're being asked individually to sign on. So what makes the two different?
The difference was the Attorney General brought the tobacco litigation at that point in time.
Okay.
And here, some attorneys general have brought the litigation on behalf of the entire state. That's not what's happening in Minnesota.
Okay.
And mainly the counties and cities are bearing the burdens on this as opposed to the state. And so it probably makes more sense for the counties and the cities to be the ones who are pursuing it as opposed to the state pursuing it. And so, I mean, that's the difference as to why, it seems kind of piecemeal, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But in I would say the majority of instances, the cities and counties are suing as opposed to the states. There are some states, though, that are suing. Their attorneys general are suing.
Okay, all right. Because you talk about little Roseau County up on the Canadian border, which is very small, and then you got the Hennepins and the Ramseys, and then we're kind of caught in the middle. So it's all over, the gambit of size.
I'd move to approve joining the opioid litigation and partnering with Brielle and Benson Law Firm.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, second by Commissioner Olson to join the opioid litigation and partnering with the Brielle and Benson Law Firm. Any questions? Commissioner Jacob.
I thought for sure that I wouldn't have to ask this because Commissioner Ward already would have, but is 25% what everyone is settling on?
You are getting the exact same fee agreement, subject to various of the counties have different policies and procedures that go with that county. 25% is every firm every county we have is 25%. There's nobody more, nobody less.
Can I speak to that too? Because Brielle and Benson have provided us with a draft of a retainer agreement, but we obviously didn't want to finalize that until the board had an opportunity to question and make a decision. So if going forward on this motion, what I would also suggest is that you direct staff to meet with Brielle and Benson and finalize the details of that retainer agreement, and then we would bring the retainer agreement we would bring back to the board for your approval and signature on that document.
I would add that as amendment if the seconder would so consider it.
Yep.
Okay, all right. And then that will give us a day or two to read through this beautiful document.
Sure, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to be going on vacation until June 1st, but Preston Selleck in my office is going to also be working with me on this and with the Brielle and Benson firm. So.
Okay. I do have a question. So why is not our Attorney General has issues with other issues, but this doesn't rise to the, do you have an answer?
I don't know. Maybe, I know that our Attorney General Swanson is involved in lots of different litigations on behalf of consumers, but it may be because of probably the individual data that has to come from the counties, so or the cities of Minneapolis. So
Okay.
I suspect that's one of the reasons.
All right. She does have issues with certain things that involve us directly, but not this one. Commissioner Jacob.
So I'm supportive of the motion, but one more question is how specifically will this help both the victims and the taxpayer?
Well, we expect, with respect to the county, the two things we're seeking are money damages. So obviously being able to recover all of the costs that have been spent by the county for this issue, we are hoping to recover. That would help the county. The second thing is that we're seeking injunctive relief as well. We're trying to stop the kind of marketing that they've been doing on this types of medication. And we're actually going to try and seek to go further than just the opioid medication. I mean, and start part of the tobacco litigation was to seek to have the tobacco manufacturers stop marketing tobacco in the way that they were marketing it. That's one of the things that we're trying to do that would benefit the county and the public at large, to have more education, more warnings, more understanding of what's going on, and not the same types of hard pushing marketing techniques that the opioid manufacturers and distributors have been using, with the intention of getting people hooked, so that once you're hooked, you got to start buying the product someplace. And obviously people go outside the medical purview to get the drugs that they need. And so that's part of what we're seeking to.
And so this would be to recover, the monetary aspect would be to recover expenses we've already incurred, not to gain funds to start new programs. Is that right?
I think that's correct. I mean, the
So
new.
I understand what the intent is.
It's for damages.
It has to be damages that have already incurred.
The actual harm that we've been causing.
It would be damage, I mean, that's what the lawsuit would seek to recover. That's not to say that a settlement might not have that type of recovery for programs going forward. You can get a lot different kinds of relief out of a settlement than you can demand out of a lawsuit. So, and so I don't know that they've talked about that, but my guess is that they will talk about that in the multi-district litigation as part of the settlement too.
One of the things I recall they did in the tobacco litigation was to set up a large escrow account to fund advertising against tobacco. And I mean, and again, there's a number of different ways that we can ask for things that you might not be able to get strictly from a lawsuit, which is damages and injunctive relief. So.
Right. Yes, we have a wellness program that's funded by tobacco money.
Perfect. Okay, just a second.
Any further questions? One for, with the contractor.
Retainer agreement.
Retainer. Will we receive updates through email or something to have some idea? Because these things take a long time.
You mean the actual work that would be done, or the retainer agreement itself?
Well, so we know where it's moving. I'm assuming, Attorney Sonneman, you'd keep us updated as to where we're
As
at
to the
with.
status of
Yeah,
the case
okay.
going forward?
Yeah.
Yes, we could give you periodic updates so that you know what's going on and
Yeah, 'cause
keep
this
in
could
touch.
take years. You could be you said you celebrated how many years? You could be retired before.
I'm in my mid-60s right now, and I just signed a 7-year lease in the IDS. So.
But you might be
I'm planning
retired
on
before.
going for a while.
Be retired before this case is settled.
There is a death clause in my lease. We do provide, Scott provides, a semi-weekly, 3 weeks update on what's going on in Ohio. Send that out to everybody so that everybody gets kind of a go. And it becomes easier once you've seen one status update and you get used to kind of figuring out who the players are and what's going on. Then you get the second one, and then you're kind of in the flow, and then you'll understand the next one even
Yeah,
more.
I would appreciate that. That would be good information. Okay. All right, we have a motion. Does everybody understand the motion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, we're approved.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
See your retainer agreement in the upcoming.
Yeah, I'll bring it back in June, so your June meeting.
7.3, receive monthly finance and budget. Mr. Moga.
We'll provide an update on the April finance update. The beginning cash flow was $10.6 million. Actual revenues were $475,000. Actual expenses are 1.5, and the ending cash was 9.5. For the beginning of the year, the cash started out at 14.3. Actual revenues are 1.8, and the actual expenses are 6.6. Ending cash is $9.5 million. The variance in the general fund at this point is a negative 4.8 compared to a negative 4.6. Overall, it's a negative 6.6 compared to a negative 7.8. I do want to point out that community services is in the negative cash at this point. And the other thing is, looking at the two different areas, I did look at revenue, and that variance is due to kind of just a timing of some expenses that were paid earlier than in the past. And then in community services, kind of the norm is that we have out-of-home placements is kind of a cause for a lot of these, that big variance there. Any questions on this document? If not, we'll go to the summary cash flow. Beginning cash flow started at 19.6, actual revenues were 7.4, and actual expenses were 14 million. Ending cash is 13 million. Variance, again, is the negative 6.6 compared to a negative 7.8. Any questions on that document? If not, we'll go to the summary budget. Expenses at this point are at 33%, and the general fund is at 35%, and human services is at 38%. And like I said, I kind of looked at there, and there's a few items that are just the timing on some of those expenses in general fund that actually had occurred earlier than actually later. And there's more some contract payments on that. Interest, we budgeted $150,000, and we're at $58,000, so we're at 39%. We're actually doing a little bit better there, but again, that number is very low compared, if you go back years, that number used to be in the $1 million range when we used for interest. Any questions on that document? If not, thank you.
I do, related to this, I do have a question for Administrator Fritz. We need to have a meeting to discuss our budget philosophy or where we're going. It's middle of May. When, do you have an idea when we're going to have that initial conversation?
We can have one anytime you want. We didn't do that last year or the year before that I'm aware of, but we can.
I thought we had it last year, where we kind of say where we want to go and what we want to do and red flags and.
I think my
your approach
assumption going in is that we're trying to reduce the deficit as much as possible, and to make sure that we're accounting for everything that we know of or can anticipate. But I'm open to suggestions.
Okay, I don't know what the rest of the board members.
Right now?
Well, right. The process is basically that for the next month, the departments provide input, so whatever they think that they need or update their information from the previous year. Then Pat and I tend to go through it. Then we have to meet with the departments. That takes another couple weeks and months to get that information refined. And eventually, in I think it was August last year, we provided a document to the county board which summarized all that information, and it had been gone through a couple times. We don't really get information that's worth looking at until we've gone through it a couple times, because there's a lot of things that have to be adjusted, corrected, make sure they're included, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the summary that is what we've done in the past.
And we did see some projections into the future at, I think it was even the year before.
We've done that for the last two cycles, yeah.
And do you see anything significantly different where it's been taken about 6% increase to balance the?
Yeah, if you're looking at the big picture, the out-of-home placements is still, one of the areas that's a problem. Getting a handle on making sure we're budgeting enough to cover that. I think in the past we've always fallen short because we would hope that at some point it would kind of ratchet back based on historical information. But I think everybody knows with the changes in the way they handle out-of-home placements now since the governor's task force in 2015 and the implementation of those recommendations, we haven't seen any going back to the old days where the numbers were smaller. They tend to be, it increased to that 90 or so children, and that's kind of stayed steady the last 2 years. So, and that's probably the biggest factor in there. That's a non-controllable kind of expense. The other ones are, I guess I put that in discretionary or non-discretionary expenses. It's something that we have to pay, and the thing there is just trying to estimate as best we can what that impact's going to be. I don't know of anything else that would affect the budget in a significant way. Pat, can you think of anything off the top of your heads that we're anticipating? There are some changes in community services that we have to analyze, and that'll be something we'll bring to the board through the process. The state is making adjustments and in a lot of cases reducing the amount of money we're getting in various programs. And I think Heather can attest to that. We just got a couple correspondence this week, but we don't know the impact yet. Some of it's trickling down from the federal government to the state government and to us. And so we'll have to look at the impact on those kind of things. So when they start to reduce allocations, 20,000 here and 50,000 here, and it adds up. I think from a big picture standpoint, I don't know of anything that's significant that would be driving the budget increases other than the.
Well, I guess one thing that I was following is in the work, the verifying the work for all the Medicare and everything.
Yes.
Now, I don't know where we're at, because our governor has 14 days to decide what he's going to approve and disapprove.
Right, so we're
But
kind of in limbo.
that could have significant impact on workforce.
Right.
And
Yeah, along with some of those other federal changes we've been noticed. The problem is until they're actually passed and take form, it's really hard to figure out how they're going to impact us. There are some things that the state had to do in terms of performance improvement plans in the community services area, and although they have some ideas how it's going to trickle down to the counties, we don't know yet. So there are some things that we just don't know, and until we know that. And then in the course of the budget discussion this last year, we've been working a lot with primarily community services, but some other departments as well, to bring some additional discussions to the board in the fall with the budget, during the budget process, identifying some things that possibly might be decision points for the county board, whether it's reference to the justice system or whether it's in community services. So, and a few other departments as well.
I didn't know if you were maybe looking for a second on having a special philosophy meeting, but I'm comfortable with. I think it's difficult for administration if we have 5 different philosophies. I think that's all been laid on the table at our previous budget meetings, and I think the administrator has a.
Right. I just hope that this 6% figure isn't locked into somebody's work plan, that we can sustain a 6%, like we did going forward. So at some point in time, we need to.
Well, right now,
look at what we're spending, of our taxpayer, asking our taxpayers to spend.
I think,
go ahead.
I think too, there's another important issue, and it's what are we spending? But every year we're looking at lower reimbursements on mandated services every single year. Each year, it's the main focus with our legislators, but there's nothing that I've seen that slows down that declining reimbursement. It just continues and continues and continues. And you can spend as much as you did the year before, but if your reimbursements go down every year,
right,
we have to pick up.
Even the
at some
cumulative effects of how many years that's been adding up. I mean, even if it didn't go up one year, we still have all these previous years of increased mandates that are driving our budget.
Yeah. And I don't disagree. I understand that. But at some point in time, we have to say, maybe we can't do all the things that we've done in the past. Maybe we have to shift our priorities.
Well, and that's one thing
the state likes to shift them for us. But
that's one thing that the board had expressed, a couple of years ago, when it first came on, and that's what we have been looking at. But the board did a good job, or its administration and the staff did a good job also of putting together the mandated, non-mandated programs and what we could decide not to do. And there are a few pockets here and there, and that's some of the things we might talk about in the fall. But that low-hanging fruit has been picked. There's not that many things that you can just say we can't do them. The state either mandates them, or there are areas like roads and bridges where we get some funding, and we have a kind of a set portion that we pay for certain roads. It doesn't mean that there aren't things you can't cut or look at and say maybe we don't buy that, but But those big things where you're talking about impact to get rid of an $800,000 deficit each year, plus the growth in personnel, labor costs, and all the other things associated with it that we don't control for the most part because of the way that's set up.
Those grow even if our employee base doesn't
If
grow.
we don't do anything, there's growth in those areas. And because of the structure of that process, that's an area that's really not very discretionary. There's not a lot you can do with it. The other part is again, we subsidize community services by, I think last year we looked at it was about $4.5 million. Well, when you're looking at a tax levy of 18 million, that's quite a bit. It really aren't those kind of things you can say, let's look at this big program and get rid of it, and that's gonna make a big dent. There isn't that much there anymore.
Well, and community services is a large budget, and so what you find is with lower reimbursements, you squeeze out the discretionary in your budget.
Yeah.
It just starts to squeeze it out, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
I will never lose my philosophy to struggle and fight for smaller government. And,
Oh, no,
and I think that's well known. I mean, it's just a well-known fact.
Yeah, and we've had the sheriff come with some personnel requests, and my question also, is there anything that's coming through the jail advisory committee that might have to be addressed this year, either in terms of personnel or prevention or shoring up what we have, or are we leaving those to individual department heads to pick up and put in their own requests?
Yeah,
and deal with it that way, or?
It's kind of both.
Okay.
Karen and I have already talked a little bit. I know that she has, because she's head of the CJCC and kind of obviously part of the jail committee and so forth, and they're all kind of tied together. So I know that Karen is working on kind of looking at those needs and what might at least be put on the table this year in the fall that are in conjunction with the kind of things that are being looked at as part of the justice system in the needs assessment phase. It might be that those are not necessarily have to be done this year, but there are certainly things that are going to come up either kind of identify them in the fall, but they're also going to come up with when you talk about the jail, because some of those programs are things that keep people out of jail,
Right.
which then therefore means that we might not have to build or look at the facility or change the facility to accommodate them because they're not necessarily.
Right, and if some of those services are diminished or eliminated, then that would change the whole jail advisory committee perspective, because they would be looking at a different set of options
Well,
for
there would be a
people
gap.
in
We would
jail.
identify the gap.
Right, yeah.
And we would identify the gap
Okay.
but there
I
are
just
some
wanna-
programs that are.
Can I just mention, we have a printed agenda, and in order to be fair to the public, I think we've gone pretty
That's
far afield of,
You're having your budget meeting right now.
Yes, question.
I don't think our philosophies have changed, so I think that's part of the record.
Yeah,
All right.
but the philosophy is going in, looking at ways to be efficient and effective.
Right.
I mean, that's definitely the message. So.
Okay. I think I'm the only one that had moving on to committee reports or communications. I think this morning at the emergency management meeting, it was nice to see Ben Klinger in his new position, and he's really, getting up to speed fast on a lot of his responsibilities. But didn't he say it's EMS week, emergency medical services, EMT? One of those.
it's emergency something week.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, and being living out in the rural area, we have such great volunteer groups, and it was good to hear a couple of the volunteer groups have actually recruited a few. We have a problem with recruitment of new people to come into these roles of responsibility. It's a huge, and I would just want to say thank you to anybody that's in the emergency medical services, EMTs, firefighters, or anything, that they do such a great service for our communities, and then we want to thank them.
By the way, Ben has been very well received by a lot of folks, so
Yes.
that's a really good thing.
Okay.
Does a great job.
Yes, great job. And then just one wild and crazy idea. Think about this. I was at an AMC meeting, and this is something to look out into the future. You know how counties, we regulate land use through planning and zoning, conditional use permits and everything. We had a futurist talk to us, and one of the big issues is airspace. With the onslaught of drones in delivering packages, and everything and such, we may have to zone our airspace. So my question to this futurist lady was, how much do I own above, my property? Think about it.
Probably nothing.
I don't know. She couldn't give me a definitive answer.
Or is there a way to tax it?
If you do, yeah, we'll tax it.
I know. Put a value on it.
I sat in on a meeting at AMC once, and it's all divided into different levels, layers, what can fly at what height,
Yes.
whether it's emergency, drone, air, but a lot of it came down to how far a bullet can reach.
Okay.
That's how much control you have over. If a drone's on your property and you want to shoot it, it's fair game, is what they said.
But you can imagine in,
Eagle or an eagle.
you can imagine in major metropolitan areas, with all this stuff going on, that it'll be something in the future to look at. All right, with that, I would entertain.
So moved.
Commissioner Olson, seconded by, I didn't hear a second.
Second.
Commissioner Jacob to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We're adjourned. Thank you. So I got to figure out how much space I have above my acreage.
Well, maybe they should buy the use of that.